This is, anyone who rewinds this, or by any weird circumstances come and seen this live, it's just gonna watch me looking around. Oh, this link. I'll make that super big. This is me dancing. Alrighty. Back to reality. Oh, there comes gravity. Oh. So, as I said, oh, I'm already a minute and 15 into it. No one is here. How could you be? I'm going to be back in about 10 minutes and we'll get this started. If you happen to show up, if anyone happens to show up, you can start chatting. That would be fun. Hang on a second, it's automatically embedding it as opposed to actually being a stream. So when you click on this, usually you can do so. There is a. This is weird. I'm now looking at it on my phone as well. Live broadcast. It's not live. There's a delay. Hang on a second. It's automatically embedding it as opposed to actually being a stream. So. All right. Hey, is anyone there? I see 3 people, but 2 of them could be me right now. I am trying to figure out, as I said, in courseware, it is making you, it is automatically is embedding it as opposed to creating a link to it, which is not what I wanted it to do. Damn it. Okay. What I'm going to do as well is create yet another label and see if that works. Switch over, see if anyone is saying hello yet. Nope. There we go. Add. Friday the 20th class. Oh, no, 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 no. Just the YouTube link. I got this now. Let's see. All I need to do. It's slow. What a surprise. CVU internet being slow. Okay, so if you're on the Moodle page right now and you refresh it, you'll see Friday the 20th's class immediately beneath the thing that says today's class, Friday the 20th. I'm also now going to edit that right now and get rid of that embed to stop these problems. Sorry, this is the first day of testing. What? Settings. Oh, okay. Follow the link below. That will do it. That'll update. That'll save. I'm just going to hide that other one right now. Let's see how that works. So if I go in and courseware, see me on at best. Hey, people are here. Cool. All right. All right. All right. All right. So I'm seeing people here. I'm seeing Kima, Evie, Brian, Annabelle. Greetings, fellow shut-ins. Annabelle, hi. How is self-isolation? Cool. Chat amongst yourselves, and I will be back at when my thing says 1 o'clock, which is 5 minutes from now. I think you are on a time delay. Charlotte Clark just said hi, everyone. And we'll see how long it takes for you to go the Charlotte Clark saying hi, everyone. All right. Boom. About 2 minutes starting my class. It's live stream on Facebook. If you want to watch along, cool. There's chat and everything. People are, sharing. So it'll be fun. Okay. Just getting the hair out of my mouth so I don't have to do that in front of the class. I get to do that in front of you. Bye. Putting my coffee down. Aha. Animal Crossing came out. Yeah, and Doom came out as well, right? I have that on my wish list. Evie bought a puzzle of 1,000 pieces, so that's what she's working on. Cool. Kima is not a puzzle person. She gives up so very quickly. That's not a bad thing. Anyway, hey, Quarantinerinos, how are you doing? It is, I'm just going to start. You know exactly what has basically happened. I don't know what students have received from the administration. The faculty haven't received much from the administration, come to that. We have such stuff as I read the press releases saying students will find out Wednesday at 4 p.m. the state of their semester, but I never actually got a message directly towards faculty saying, oh, by the way, you are required by this time. So hopefully you've heard from everybody. Hopefully, more importantly, that you are safe and you are sound and that everyone is more or less happy. I'm going to cough. I'm going to be coughing into a microphone, so that's even grosser. I'm also, maybe I need to twist this so that I don't have the weird lighting buzzes and stuff. Every time I come in and out of shadow, I look moody and mysterious now, which is what people are hoping for from a professor. All right, I sent out the PDF with the PowerPoint slides, and as I said, this video will be up more or less as is. I might crop out some of the me staring at a screen and typing at the very, very beginning if you were to erase this, but the chat will be part of it, so that can become a sort of ongoing record. I'm also going to take it and sort of trim it down a little bit. Probably, I don't know whether it would retain the chat, but I'll trim it down, and I'm going to add in certain kind of fancy ways the slides as well. So there's the opportunity of basically having the sort of this feed access to it, or kind of a more integrated, almost what you would expect for this to be done well ahead of time. I don't know if CBU has the technology to have made this easier. They certainly weren't forthcoming sharing that technology if we have it. But I'm reasonably adept at this sort of thing, and I will get it to you in a reasonable period of time. And the PowerPoints will be available in like their regular standard PDF form as well. So I've sent emails to this effect, but I just wanted to cover it in this way. We have such things as what the classes are going to be. We have 5 more classes, I mean, if you include today, and we have 5 more chapters of Andrea's book. So that is how we are going to proceed. Maintaining the same schedule, I will be in front of a computer, hopefully on campus, at 2:30 on Mondays and 1 o'clock on Fridays. This is not going to go 75 minutes. If it does, someone call security and have them shoot me in the face. Hopefully this will only be about 30 or 40 minutes long. Absolute maximum. But let's see. So we'll do this, and then this is what we're going to have for lectures. The Yeah, that's slide number 2. All that information is going to be there. I want to talk briefly about the rest of the assignments for the semester. As I said, more or less everything can go as according to plan. We have. Can people hear me? I got the light seems to be going on okay, but it's on like the second or third. I know I'm not peaking, but if I'm too quiet, let me know, and I will project more. I'm using the internal mic as opposed to an external. The exam is going to be exactly the same as the exam you had. We've already spoken about this, but I'll just confirm. It'll be on Moodle, and it'll be the same format. It'll be at the same time. The JKC students will have extra time available. And as I said, I grant you 3 hours and 4.5 for JKC students. You don't need that amount of time, but I grant it because I grant it. There you go. Hey, volume is good. Hey, Catherine, how's it going? I don't know if I'm going to be greeting absolutely everyone by name, but if I see a name that I haven't seen already, I might just go, hey, how's it going? So exam is fine. I think the annotation assignment can more or less go as planned. You can always be emailing me, or I could also set up a forum so that you can have sort of collective conversations about that, because the answer that I give to one person is probably likely going to be the answer I give to another. That being said, I got an email this weekend basically saying, I'm trying to come up with the 3 sources, and but I'm self-quarantined. I cannot get to the library, and that is completely fair. We have a very weird discipline, folklore in general, contemporary legend doubly so. A lot of the stuff is in obscure places. Contemporary Legends of the Journal, for example, of which this is a copy, and you can't see this, but behind you is basically the entire inventory of contemporary legends. We do not have it easily available online. I have a link somewhere. I'm pretty sure I put it up there. Yeah, it's down on the Moodle page. I have a link to the first 20 years of it, but it's in the MUN archive system. They aren't in sort of sleek journal archive things, not like a JSTOR style or an EBSCO style. So they are cumbersome to look through at best. And then that doesn't necessarily encompass things. And things like CBU's got rid of some of its electronic books. So we used to have Brunvan's Encyclopedia of Urban Legends. We don't have that in an electronic version anymore. I think we used to have Smith and Bennett's Greenwood Big Book of Urban Legends, and we don't have that either. So there's just going to be things that you can't have access to. So I am changing yet again, adapting to the asking for 2 as opposed to 3, and I am going to be pretty chill about even that criteria. I want people to make best efforts, and that's really all I can stress at this point. There is stuff out there. You don't always need to be looking at folklore journals. There's one person who is doing something on frivolous lawsuits, and there are some really interesting legal journals out there that talk about frivolous lawsuits and use the word contemporary legend and cite contemporary legend literature in order to do it. So feel free to do that. But I'm asking for 2, and I'm asking you to kind of try, but I'm also aware that we are living through Armageddon, and what the hell are you going to do? So, yeah, let's get to teaching. I wanted to talk a little bit about the stuff that we weren't able to cover from Andrea's introduction last time, and I want to talk primarily about like the interrelationship between folklore and popular culture. That's slide 4 for those who are standing by. One of the things that I just want to emphasize, and of course, this is sort of, in a way, Andrea's covering her bets, but she's making, I think, one of those great articulate arguments that when we talk about folklore, we've already established this, but this is a nice summary of the argument. When we're talking about folklore as a process, we want to remember that the folk, as it were, are Catholic in terms of what they draw their inferences from, what they draw their motifs from. If you are being intentionally conservative, if you are being intentionally self-reflective in terms of what constitutes folklore, that's when you start to isolate these issues, where you take folklore and you make it somehow distinct from popular culture, and turn them into sort of these silos. And that is I'm not going to say elitist, but that is an expression that doesn't actually, or an understanding of things that doesn't actually take account of what constitutes the actual sort of dynamism of folklore. So this is a really succinct argument in saying that why would a folklorist be interested in this? We draw our inspiration from popular culture as much as we draw it from some sacrosanct, inviolate folk culture. Conversely, popular culture responds to, commercializes, capitalizes on folk belief. So they're in this constant set of flux. And yes, I think it's important for that point she makes about being aware that, there is this sort of Gramscian thing, this idea that popular culture can also be used as a form of hegemony, structuring and influencing and setting up some maintaining some kind of message that is ultimately good for institutional culture, in terms of economics, in terms of notions of belief, in terms of normative behavior, and so on. We recognize that is part of it, and that's why you always have to have your complex glasses on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you dismiss the concepts of it out of hand. You can employ that hermeneutic of suspicion while also employing that hermeneutic of empathy, and that hermeneutic of openness to it, because the folk always use what is at their disposal. Remember, as I said, Crossroads, the greatest movie of all time. If I haven't explained that to you, I will explain it at some other moment. So keep that in mind. That's going to be part of, we've already more or less established this over the semester. And the other point that she talks about is untellability. Again, we've spoken about this, but why do we talk about these things to begin with? It's not to suggest that oh my God, are my eyes closed? Shit. Sorry. I do this even when there's no one in the room. It's not to suggest that all folklore is inherently doing this thing. But we've spoken about the concept of tellability and untellability. When we are dealing with issues that we don't necessarily have some kind of voice for, think about Ellis and the naming, and how critically important name is to the legend process, that first step in the half-life of the legend. If we don't have the name, if it doesn't exist in some kind of metonymic force already, we don't really have the wherewithal to express things. But more than that, so we might employ some kind of metaphor that kind of expresses the thing that we're kind of trying to express. And then more than that, we have these issues that they're untellable, not because we don't have a name for it, but because they're a concept of trauma, because telling them exposes ourselves to potentially to risk. Telling them exposes ourselves potentially to the risk of reliving that moment. And so instead we tell it, like Gillian Bennett sometimes says, which I think is an Austen quote, we tell it slant. So we employ these metaphors. So when we are looking at things, even as something like Slender Man, Slender Man is the example that she's giving. Even when we talk about these things, we are talking about, we were often talking about, they stop being stories about some tall, skinny dude, and they start being stories, about, Robert Casey signed into his wife's YouTube account, and everyone's embarrassed. What was I saying? Oh, I'm so easily distracted. It stops being a thing about some tall, skinny dude who lives in the internet or is like lurking in the shadows. And it starts to be about lurking. It starts to be about the sense of one being watched. It starts to be about that sort of palpable sensation of being subject to intrusion and voyeurism and so on. And if we don't really have a language developing to talk about those sorts of concerns, and you can make an argument that even the most highly intelligent, highly socially adept, highly social media savvy adolescents don't necessarily have that language for it, the appeal of the story and the passing on of the story might in part be because their actual experience defies tellability. So when we're thinking about these sort of notions of even like what constitutes the monster, it's not too big a leap to suggest that it is a metaphor for something, but we're not. But that metaphoricity, the reason why we employ the metaphor, might actually be not simply because we want to disguise it, but because disguising it keeps us safe. So there you go. So now on to chapter 2. Hooray! And yeah, we are in the midst of this. The disease is coming from inside the house, where we are trying to establish the patterns of disease. It is a so moving from 6 to 7. Yeah, and Andrea herself on Facebook posted a local article from her local television station in Greenville, North Carolina, at East Carolina University, where she's from, with where they start to report the first case. And if you, I'll add this link, but here's just like the her comment on it. This article where they tell us about our first case, effectively making them our patient zero, basically follows chapter 2 of my book a little too well. I can already see it in the table. So the idea that immediately we are trying to understand the pathology and the spread of the story of coronavirus within particular communities, and we're already using patient zero kind of terminology. And so the thing about the narratives, outbreak narratives, and the sort of desire for coming up with causes, trying to establish models that explain risk. There's sort of two senses of risks that are going on. But first of all, it's good to recognize that these stories are, of course, explicitly on the surface about contamination, that they are about the spread of a disease. How do I put it on the slide? The spread of some kind of threat to the human person across geographies and through populations. And that is sort of the discourse that's happening both in the scientific community and in the vernacular community. Don't be patient 31, someone in South Korea, I think, who allegedly didn't practice proper social distancing. Oh, that popped up on Twitter. Yeah, and everything was going great until that one moment happened, so to speak. But at the same time, they are on the scientific level, on the epidemiological level, they are about the spread of contagion and how to understand, not that they use the word contagion, they're about communicable diseases and how can we model how they have spread in order to affect containment and so on. But then they also exist in the vernacular discourse. The vernacular discourse is thinking metaphorically as well. And it speaks to the primary issues that we deal with in urban legend and the reason they were sort of urban to begin with. So what did I say? They are simultaneously inextricable from metaphorical contamination. The intrusion of ambivalent categories into the assumed, and by assumed we mean privileged, norm, where we have the other, the capital O other, by ethnicity, by nationality, by sexual orientation, whatever, as coterminous with a contaminating agent in and of itself. And there often tends to sort of be an implicit moral hazard argument. Moral hazard, if you're not familiar with that from sort of, like a basic concept in ethics, in that there are behaviors that it's implicit moral hazard. It's not direct correlation, but it's a good thing to consider, that there are behaviors that in theory some cynical ethicists think that we would do were it not for the fact that there is harm associated with them. So were it not for this sort of thing, we would go wild. So that institutes the idea of punishment. It institutes the idea of kind of the enforcement of negative consequences for particular activities and behavior. You can make an argument that moral hazard is one of the things that our entire legal system is based on, because we have penalties for things that might not even necessarily be immediately dangerous acts in and of themselves, but they invite that, and therefore we curb them. So parking violations and so on, that you are paying a penalty. So, but for fear of being penalized, one obeys. That's one of the concepts. But the other notion is that this gets sort of extrapolated onto the other, in that were they behaving the way that they ought to behave, and we understand the way they ought to behave by the way a sensible person like myself behaves, they would not have exposed themselves to this. So it starts to also associate some kind of blame, but it also starts to associate some kind of um, rationale, some kind of risk behavior, that if I don't do that, don't do what Donnie Don't does, if I don't do that, I will probably be okay. So they, as much as they are assigning blame, they're also tacitly, at least, suggesting some kind of pathway out of it. And so next slide, we talk about like the appeal of ground zero and patient zero, because it starts to introduce a plot. We narrativize this, and as you said in the last chapter, in the introductory chapter, one of the things that these narratives do is that they introduce this into something approaching, as she says, a type, that they have, the implicit, if we want to talk about sort of Vladimir Prop's morphology of folktale, an implicit stasis, and then some kind of intrusion that introduces some kind of imbalance, some disequilibrium, and then a series of presumed redressive actions that will restore some kind of stasis. And thinking about who the actors are, where the characters are, where the place is, helps us frame it this way. And again, these are important things. The notion of a kind of a ground zero and the notion of a patient zero works on the epidemiological scale as well, because they are required for models, but models and stories aren't necessarily the same fucking thing. So that introduces the sort of the complicating action. So place and inhabitants become interrelated. If you could trace a disease, if you could trace the outbreak of something to a particular place, that's sound epidemiologically, that's good. We know that. We can start to ascribe causes to it and so on that level, on an appeal to sort of the redressing the issue. But we also start to fundamentally, potentially, stigmatize the place, and we associate the place with the inhabitants, and then we make a sort of a back and forth that way. So her quote, where it says, "Patient zero not only provides a scapegoat, but also serves as an example to others. As long as people do not act in the same way as patient zero, they are safe." And she uses the expression on the next slide, "blazon populaire." And again, I'm pretty sure I've spoken about this, but I don't know if I've ever shoved it up on a slide. Blazon populaire is the fancy folklore term basically for prejudicial statements, beliefs. It's one of those things where we would list them, and we'd probably list them as statements or dirty jokes or whatever, ethnic jokes, whatever. But behind them is really the understanding, the cultural, esoteric understanding of how that group operates. In order to make sense of the expression, in order to make sense of the tale, in order to make sense of the joke. Again, they kind of function much like in traditum. They become these examples of traditum as well, where we don't necessarily believe them to be operative, but we are fluent with them, and they can go from being mere fluent to actually how we are informing judgment very quickly. So they move back and forth. It's one of the reasons why legend and joke are so closely associated, is that they both draw from the same pool of shared resources. You want to think of things like a kind of a banally stigmatized group, like redheads, for example. All the sort of jokes about redheads and not having souls and so on. I truly don't think anyone necessarily believes that. I really hope that you don't. On the other hand, you are fluent enough that you can make those jokes easily when they occur, or at least understand those jokes. And again, understanding the jokes doesn't necessarily mean that you find them funny, but at least you find them comprehensible. You're like, yeah, that's not cool, dude, is a perfect answer to that. But the means that you do not necessarily get those terms of references. So again, thinking about like Buchan's article on Pet Chow, which is a great example of this, the switch between a motifed traditum notion of how these people are and how it becomes operative in how it become operative when it becomes threatening, when it becomes something that we are necessarily thinking of. Brian just said, it is so weird to me that we can see this idea of ground zero and the idea of a scapegoat happening right now in the world. Trump calling COVID-19 the China virus is the perfect example. Exactly. That's the perfect example. Give me a second for my delicious, delicious one pleasure left in life. Yeah, exactly. And branding it that way, and now you have, fortunately, in this Twitter sphere, you immediately have the people who are taking that to task, and you are pointing out sort of the counter examples. And what, like the idea of the Spanish flu seems to be one that's floating around, and that I have seen. And remember, I'm not an expert in the history of epidemics, so I am probably as well versed in some of this as you are. But the Spanish flu example came up, and then, well, Spain didn't complain about when we called the Spanish flu of 1918, 1919 the Spanish flu. And first of all, yeah, they did. And second of all, that isn't even where it came from. That's where it was first reported, because they had a freer press in at the time than in many other countries. So they started recording, there is this very exceptional flu that seems to have struck, and that the name became associated with there. But the first cases were actually American cases. Yeah, the picture that Trump has about where he crossed out the word Corona and replaced the word China in Sharpie. Go for it. So patient zero and super spreaders work the same kind of way, because if ground zero is about place and the stigmatizing movement, you're trying to also establish, well, how it goes from this foreign other, this land far away, this place of danger that is really defined first and foremost by being not here, and then second by whatever thunderous cascade of motifs that you put across or put upon this particular place through Blazon Populaire, through Traditum, and so on. And so it's like, oh, it's not simply not in Cape Breton, it is in China. And so all the prejudices that we have about this particular place come to the fore. Or it's in Africa, the great indistinguished Africa, where we just sort of lump the entire continent in one thing. So think about Diane's article on the AIDS legends that we read earlier, in terms of the North American Euro consciousness that tends to think of Africa as just one place, as opposed to a continent much larger than North America with regions associated with it. But once we hear Ebola, that's a river in Africa, it's like gorsh, and then all the prejudices, none of which are cool, come to the fore. So the idea, so that's the place, but the patient zero and the super spreaders come through by now associating one of the people, either of that place, or someone who through circumstances exposed themselves to the communicable disease, expose themselves to contamination, and then become contaminators themselves, spread the disease through whatever, taking it from its point of origin to other places. It's moving through space. I'm just thinking about movement and patterns and rites of passage and so on. There might be something there, but let's just put a pin in that idea for a while. Because it's all based on how does it get from there to here? Because these stories are told from here. These stories are told, in the grand swell of history. Hence now, if that's a word, we'll have the benefit of trying to understand these things as patterns. But again, legend emerges in the moments of uncertainty, when we are trying to sort out of all the particular sources what is the one that is the most urgent communication that we need to fundamentally pass on to those near and dear to us, and B, orient our behavior around? How do I protect myself and those that I love? And so that's that process of trying to come to an understanding. And when that understanding is built on emergent data, let alone biased data, but just fragmentary, mixed messages, we reconstruct, we fill in the holes in that narrative. This is not new, but there you go. So the stigmatized community, she gives many examples, and that's that lovely chart, which I'll refer you to. You don't necessarily, I'm not going to cover it, but things like Typhoid Mary. So first you have the stigmatized population of the Irish, and the Irish as working class servants in 19th and early 20th century America, plus the idea, but sort of that different issue in terms of, well, they might be the stigmatized population amongst us cool Protestants. But over on top of that, you also have the notion that, well, they are here to do work that rightly you, housewife, should be doing yourself. So the fact that she is a cook is not incidental to the Typhoid Mary narrative, let alone the idea that she's, I mean, this isn't even a capitalist narrative, but you could certainly put an interesting capitalist critique on this, or I guess a Marxist critique technically of the capitalism, in that she is told not to work in there, but has no other means to work. So what is the nature of society? What do we owe each other? But I don't think Typhoid Mary necessarily gets taken all the way over to that Marxist critique too often. It still basically speaks about danger. Andrea Kitta is communicating to me. Does she have a question?
Oh no, I wish I could watch it, but I have a meeting that I have to be attending because it's about going up for full. Hooray.
Message from Andrea. I should turn that off. There we go. So as it moves through the population, you have these sort of stigmatized population. You have these stigmatized groups that are bringing it towards Gaetan Dugas, patient zero for AIDS, HIV, and the issue of traveling. I think that's where you start to see it moving away from a pure stigmatized population of the the people who are not us, who are coming towards us. But then you have people like Gaetan Dugas. I mean, he's French Canadian, so it might maybe for a Anglo-American context they were othered, but fundamentally it was about moving from places of safety to places of danger and traveling back and forth. He was a air steward, and again in a ridiculously homophobic, heteronormative culture. Even that, the idea of a male stewardess was enough of a stigmatizing category that he brings that to it as well. And then you have the notion of the border, and so you're not even talking about individual groups and individuals from groups. You are now talking about entire groups, and that kind of metaphor that starts to come forward. Again, the notion of contagion, the notion of a dangerous agent that's coming through. So whether you are talking about sort of a specific stigmatized population in terms of like naming an identity, whatever nationality you wish to bring in, or even just the undifferentiated specific blazon populaire that we have with foreigner, with outsider. So all y'all, you have that kind of aspect. And then you have, if travel is already now a stigmatized thing, why would you ever want to leave home? And you get that an awful lot. I told you, right, that I was talking to someone. I'm not going to put it on YouTube now because they could possibly come. But when this was coming out, like late January, early February, when these stories were just starting to percolate and people were just starting to get on the cruise ships or be not getting off the cruise ships. And sort of the idea of like, the cruise ship passenger, what are you expecting? Or is it kind of the idea of, again, like a moral hazard argument, but also, well, they're cruise ship people. They are beneath us, which is a little bit weird considering how much our Sydney local economy is based on cruise ships coming in. But then there's sort of that double twist, almost a sort of Levi-Straussian double twist, where you have the entire population is stigmatized by and pathologized, that the immigrant becomes disease. So not simply as harbinger of disease, but comes by disease. So an interesting thing, which I came across just yesterday, and this is on slide 12, where you have these two issues. Um, Remember this 4 years ago, Donald Trump Jr. He retweeted a sort of a classic meme. It's a meme that's based on a piece of anti-Semitic Nazi children's literature from the 1930s, where Jews were being compared to poisonous mushrooms, and that they look fine, but you should avoid them because they are poisonous. They look like us, but they are dangerous. And that motif of just avoid them all because of this, the association of that, it became associated with the refugee problem. And so you have, as you see on slide 12, the image, if I had a bowl of Skittles and I told you 3 would kill you, would you take a handful? That's our Syrian refugee problem. So what a charming and good citizen he is. But now, in the past couple of days, you have that same meme associated with COVID, and as a means of protection. So you have that one. The death rate for COVID-19 is only 2%. If you have 100 Skittles, but 2 will kill you, would you chance it? And I first came across this, of all things, it wasn't on some weird anti-immigrant site, because I don't follow those, but a friend of mine who's a paramedic, and it's like, this is a paramedic team, so they're using that same kind of thing. So it's interesting, the relationship between danger and then taking something as calm and cool as a Skittle as the example. And then Skittle, weirdly enough, leads us to talking about Disney. So the Disney becomes sort of the final chapter, because Disney is almost antithetical to the idea of otherness. Obviously, it's the most magic place on earth, but it isn't the most foreign place on earth. It's associated with whiteness. It's associated with hardcore mainstream American values. It's associated with safety. It's associated with all the fundamental positive attributes. And it's travel, but it's American travel, and it's travel to a place that looks an awful lot like America, and is meant to be America at its ideal, and then it becomes a place of danger. So you can't, she does the same narratives, the same table as she was doing with the Patient Zero and the Ground Zero narratives. But they don't quite work, because everyone seems to be white. There might be some kind of tourist, but everyone seems to be white. Then it becomes associated with yet another stigmatized population. It becomes associated basically with sort of like Whole Foods mobs. It becomes associated with the anti-vaxxer movement, and that seems to be the issue. But as she sort of concludes towards the end, the monstrous hybrid is it. I mean, we are now no longer dealing with an other that we can recognize as an other. We are fundamentally dealing with a danger that is indistinguishable from the ideal, from the ideal norm, as it were, middle class, educated, self-sufficient, privileged people. It's one thing when the monster is someone othered by as many dimensions as you can. I will never be like that. I'm talking about some subjectivity and so on. I will never be like that. It's quite another thing when it's going forward. Hey, Sheandra, and hey, Lynn McNeil is here. Cool. She wrote our textbook from last semester, for those of you who've taken that course. So there you go. And then the last slide, or the penultimate slide. Oh, I didn't do that next week on the channel. Last slide is a story that came out in the LA Times yesterday. Glendora man, 34, dies of coronavirus infection after visiting Disney World, sources say. So we have come this sort of remarkably full circle, in that we now have Disney World stories associated with everything. Oh, great! Like all my folklore crushes are now in on this as well. I posted this thing on Facebook so people can come in. But anyway, if you have questions for Lynn McNeil or Kim Stryker, you could also go in. Andrea's at a meeting, as I showed you. So if you have questions, start typing them now. And again, we can always sort of do a little bit more. I'm going to I don't know what I'm going to do. Stare into the distance for a few seconds while people can add things, if they so desire. I'm just going to sort of hang around for a bit. This is the part that I have no guidance about, and I'm making up on the fly. But if I see the comments, I tend to read them. I see Kima's one of the last ones. Just in general, government's blamed for a lot of wrong within a country, so if things are getting out of hand, it is a self-saving method to find an other outside us to blame. Yeah, it is, but it's also a self-saving method for the government to find someone outside ourselves to blame, if that's what you mean. So both officials, when official sources are doing it, as well as vernacular sources, and you have that reinforcement fundamentally, and it's certainly in a population that's and systems of governance where you are dealing as much with trying to be part of the general narrative as opposed to like the CDC, the government, the institutions that don't change and fundamentally are hopefully aiming at actually sort of objective understanding as opposed to being on top of the narrative. That's everything. I'm not going to dance for you, and I'm not going to ad lib. I am ad libbing. The whole thing is ad libbed. I haven't read a book. I can't read. You know that. Let's see. Charles Bukowski puzzle is still being done, I'm sure. Or Wazowski, sorry. Charles Bukowski. That would be an interesting theme for a quarantine jigsaw puzzle. I'm going to sip another cup of coffee, and I'm going to, I don't know how else I'm going to ad lib. I can show you, hey, I'm not encouraging people to buy me gifts, but here is a gift a student gave me from, I think this was from Germany. This was neat. La 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 la. Just showing stuff. Oh, hi, Andrea. Andrea here. Yeah, Andrea is like right in the chat. So if you have a question for Andrea right now, you could potentially ask her. She knows this stuff better than I do. Kima, it seems the internal hybrid that looks like us, talks like us, would instigate greater fear than the other as contagion. Yeah. I mean, that's it. Ultimately, and that's the sort of the idea of the inside the house, that if you have this notion of what is now expressly close to us as being normatively safe, when the places that we define as safe are themselves fractured, are themselves violated, what is the end point? We don't have those bases. Well, I was typing up these notes, and I think somewhere in here I used the word cosmopolis, which is a word I like to use because we sometimes think of like the metropolis and so on. And I was trying to sort of dance around this issue of urban legend, because we've spoken about why urban isn't the term because it's about contemporary. But I think there is something. Urban might not be the best term, but suburban, but the polis of it, I think, might be the cosmopolitan aspect of it, because it is about heretofore differentiated groups coming together in something that is meant to be non-differentiated. And so how do you go through that process of trying to figure things out? So the safety issue is, I think, kind of key. What is the new normal? But when the new normal is that no one is as they seem, that becomes fundamentally dangerous. Annabelle, on the monsters inside the house, I keep seeing lots of memes about getting coronavirus from Chinese food. You don't want to stop eating it, but you also have started associating Chinese food with a way to catch the disease. Yeah, similarly, there was the thing about people are not eating Chinese food, but try getting them to not eat Italian food when the Italian outbreak happens. Spreading the virus one order of egg rolls at a time. Lynn, in times of stress, we start subdividing. Us gets smaller and more specific. Ooh, good point. And Kim, did you discuss the Mother Earth people who are posting things explaining this virus as a response from the planet to shake us off, punish us, clean house? I haven't, but that's a thing. I'm not doing a huge amount because hopefully people are going to be talking about these in their papers, Kim. But that's, I think, one of the aspects as well, that you have the notion of sort of a divine retribution. Again, the moral hazard. This is what you get. And you also have the counter to that, or at least a parallel to that, is that, no, the sickness isn't people, the sickness isn't Mother Earth, but the sickness is capitalism. And that once you just like turn off this tap, all of a sudden, the pollution are down, dolphins are swimming through Venice, for God's sakes. That's kind of cool. So then you have two different moral hazard arguments that are going forward. Interesting. Earth's vaccine is our virus. That was Brian. Kima saying, "Oh yes, like we are a virus the Earth is fighting off." Andrea, "Oh yeah, that's a thing." Kima, "COVID-19 is antibodies." Kim Stryker, "You're welcome for the idea, students." Yeah, and that's the plot of The Kingsman. Yes, it was the plot of a bad movie by M. Night. The Happening. That's the plants doing it, but anyway, I don't think that was the plot of Unbreakable. Unbreakable was awesome. Cool. I'm going to sip some more coffee and see what happens. I like how this whole conversation is being hijacked by folkies. I don't know if how students are dealing with isolation, but you should hang out in academic social media circles with faculty. They are losing their fucking minds. And it's like, I don't have the validation of sitting in front of a classroom. Yeah, I'm talking to you two as well. You three, you four, however many of my peers are around here. Just very quickly, go back, Shandra. I did get a message from you. Yeah, no problem. And okay, yes, Unbreakable. That's it. So anyway, I don't know if the chat exists when. I mean, when I post this up, the chat will still be there, so you'll be able to sort of follow along. Maybe it does something fancy, like crawls up the screen instead. That's cool, but it'll still be here. And I will do an edited version that has the slides back and forth to a certain extent, and the slides will be available. And we'll see what happens at this point. I am now I'm at 56 minutes, and I know I started like 15 minutes earlier, but I said I would try to keep this to 30 minutes, 45 minutes max, because this fun live now, but for students who want to come and like watch it afterwards, if they see like an hour of just this, yeah, I don't think so. And also, I have to socially distance move myself from my office to my house sometime today, and I want to get this all done beforehand. So if you have any other comments, you can send them to me. Maybe I'll post some kind of little forum thing, so people can make comments as we in addition to this. We'll be figuring this out. Whatever I put up on Moodle will make sense. Let me just figure out what I'm going to do. Otherwise, it's on. We're going to next week, because I probably won't have to explain assignments and talk about what happened last week. The last things of last week. We're going to be talking about Slender Man. Maybe Andrea and Lynn will join us again. Lynn co-edited the Slender Man. Slender Man is Watching You. Is that the name of the book itself? A collection of Slender Man essays that came out a couple of about a year and a half ago, based on a special issue that we did. Is it here? Is this the Slender Man special issue? Nope, that's not. It's probably one over, but I'm not going to watch me look at books. So yeah, so read the Slender Man one, and again, reminder, because I think I talked about this. Did I not talk about this early in the video? If you didn't get a passing grade on the midterm, you submit questions or comments ahead of time. So read the thing, send me some comments and so on. And for each chapter, you with a day or two before, all the due dates are there. If you didn't fail the midterm, you can't submit. This is just extra credit. And get it ahead of time, and you can slowly, be doing that, helping me help you. Because if this live chat thing hadn't worked, I'd just be riffing. But now I have these questions back and forth. Has anyone heard that there might be a case of COVID-19 at the regional hospital? Yeah. Oh, Brian and Lynn are talking to each other. Oh, that's very sweet. I hadn't heard about that. That's a rumor. I mean, and I'm not saying that is a negative thing. That is an interesting story that's developing. Keep on top of it. So extra credit is there for people who need a couple of more marks. It's for the next 4 readings, which are the next 4 classes. So Monday, chapter 3. Be well. The people who are near you, keep them near you, and everyone else stay at least 6 feet away. Bye. I'm going to end this. Oh wait, honestly feeling a little starstruck by all folklorists. Oh, that's so very sweet. Yeah. Keep your fan crushes to yourselves. I'm ending the stream. Oh, heard there are a couple of presumptive cases in Glace Bay. Couldn't find the source. Guys, we're all in this together. Nova Scotia stopped sharing counties with the virus. Ugh, gotta love it. I'm just going with let's assume Sydney has at least one case. Well, that's a happy thought for Friday afternoon, Annabelle. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna give you all 30 seconds to say goodbye to Lynn. Oh, Lynn's just said bye all. COVID first hit Canada in Markham, where Charlotte is now. So there's lots of rumors here about various locations around town that could be contaminated. Bye. Bye. Wow. Okay. Well, this conversation can continue in the live stream on Monday. See you there 2:30. Well, you see me. You'll see this bookcase at about 2:25, and then I'll show up at 2:30. And let's just let the good times roll. Be well, everybody. I'm ending stream. Bye.